Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol nהיה b'dvarei. L'chaim, l'chaim, everybody. To life, and to life for Am Yisrael Chai, and for the hostages, that all of them should be returned, and all the soldiers should be well, and they should all return, every single last one of them. Whatever has happened till now is too much of a loss. L'chaim.
L'chaim. Amen.
So just briefly, we're going to say a prayer for the hostages, for the soldiers. Chapter number 20 of Tehillim, of Psalms. You can say it together with me. Just say a few of the lines. Lam natseach mizmor leDavid yancha Adonai b'yom tzara yisagef Hashem elehei Yaakov hemakaro v'nafal v'nachnu kam misaydad Adonai Hoshia hamelech yanenu v'yom kareinu. Some of them rely upon chariots and some upon horses, but we rely upon and invoke the name of God. They bend and fall, and we rise and stand firm. God, deliver us. May the King answer us on the day that we call. May we hear only good news. So, folks, today, you need a book. It's in the office. Sorry. You want to go? It's open, the door, if you want to go pick it up. In Rena's. Yeah, behind Rena's desk. I think it's there. Okay. So today you really need to put on your Kabbalistic cap, because we're going to go through a real tremendous ride together, a journey that's going to take a lot of brain power, because you're going to go places you've never been before, experiences that you never had before. So hang on tight. It's going to be something very special. So 3 weeks, we've been learning about faculties, attributes of the soul. We examine how it parallels with Seder Hishtalshelus, the sophisticated network of the developing links of God, from God's desire all the way to an actualization of a physical world that we all know and love. Or maybe not all of us love it so much, but today we're going to have a new understanding of the human soul, and it's going to reflect a very underdeveloped idea that most of us have in Seder Hishtalshelus, because some of the things that we've talked about before, worlds, people are familiar with, Biyah, Atzilus, if you dabbled a little, but we're going to explore something that is not that often spoken about. It is. And some of you already have some idea, but we're going to go into it more deeply. So before we begin, let's go to exercise 4.1 on page 111. And I'm giving you exactly 1 minute and 20 seconds to objectively, as possible, respond to each of the following self-reflective statements. Consider each question on its own merits without regard to the consistency, whether with the other responses. So you have there, go, yes, no, and it's all private, so don't worry, you will not get tested on it. Fifteen seconds left. All right. So, as I said, I'm not going to ask you to share the answers, but I do ask you the following. Did you find it difficult to give a definitive answer to the questions? Yes. Found it difficult? Yes. Okay. Okay, fine. Did you find yourself giving contradictory yes answers to two opposing statements?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Interesting. Okay. Which really, what's the conclusion? Human beings are complex, right? We're complex creatures. On the one hand, we have a part in us that aspires to be altruistic, spiritual, connected to God, right? We have that part in us. On the other hand, we have a part in us that governs us to be very selfish, hedonistic instincts to follow. So, which raises the question: what's going on under the human hood? So, Kabbalah explains very simply an idea that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, right? Text number 1 on page 112. Okay. The first of our souls, this is from Tanya, chapter 1, the end of chapter 1 and the beginning of chapter 2. The first one of our souls originates in non-holiness. The soul resides in our bloodstream to vitalize our body. It is the source of all our negative character traits, as well as those positive traits that come naturally to us, such as compassion and kindness. A Jew's second soul is actual part of the transcendent God. Now, for the Alter Rebbe and Tanya is speaking to Jewish people, his followers. There's a similar idea when it comes to non-Jews with the lower inclination, higher inclination, but this is what we, the references in Tanya is speaking to Jewish people. But again, it mirrors itself with all of people. So what do we have over here? We have two theaters of consciousness. Why? Because we have two souls. The first soul, the Nefesh HaBahamis, as it's called in Hebrew, which means an animal soul. Now, we're calling it an animal soul, but folks, it's human. But we call it an animal soul because it's like the animal. What is the animal concerned with? One thing: survival, right? It's concerned literally with only its own needs and wants. Whatever the needs and wants, that's what, right? Now, that could be simple physical needs, or it could be more loftier gratifications. But that's what it ends up, is simply survival, physical needs, self-gratification, and therefore we call it the animal soul. Now, that sounds negative, right? But yet there's also a positive side to it, because we have many positive traits that come from it. Underlying the drive, though, is self-enhancement. The animal soul can do good deeds, but ultimately it's a self-oriented good deed, meaning you'll do an act of loving kindness, but why? Because it's a self-expression of you. It's you chose it because it makes you either feel good, right? Let's say feel good, whatever it is, but you chose it because it's your personal self-expression, which that means it's self-oriented. It's not altruistic, right? But that's a good quality. Furthermore, it's instinctual. It's not coming through an effort of going above and beyond, right? It's doing because it's natural. And that's why we call it sometimes nefesh hativis, which means a natural soul. So it's an animal soul because of survival and self-gratification, but it's also a natural soul because it does things, well, like an animal, out of nature, right? So even though when you might do an act of loving kindness, it might benefit another individual, and it may be a great benefit, but it's just asserting its selfhood. That's what it's doing, right? It does good things because it wants to do good things. That's asserting your selfhood. It makes you feel good. That's not a genuine act of self-sacrifice for a greater good, right? So it is the quintessential self-centered primal desire, the nefesh habahamis. Okay, is that clear? Now, because of its self-orientation, right, that it's about me, then what can that do in the immoral level? It'll lead us ultimately to immoral actions. First, in justification, whatever I do, well, must be right, and will be ultimately all the source of evil traits that we have. Okay, is that clear? So with that, we have our first term for today. Nefesh habahamis, animal soul, the human soul that is self-oriented and can trigger immoral behavior. Doesn't have to be, it could be moral behavior, right? But self-oriented. Okay. Now we have a second soul. It's called the godly soul. It's a divine entity. Our godly soul, one, yearns to become closer to God. It yearns to become closer to other souls, to others. And at third point, it yearns to fulfill its mission that God has given it. So it's in this spirit that's inside of us that we can comprehend the desires and true goodness. That when you do true goodness, what is it? You expect no return. The animal soul expects a return. It might be minimal, and it might be the return is feel good for yourself. That's animal soul. The godly soul, not even a feel good for yourself. It's expecting. Doesn't mean it doesn't get it, but it's not motivated by even the feel good that I did good. All it wants is the attachment. That's very important. All it wants is the attachment. The animal soul is concerned with its needs. The godly soul is focused on the godly needs, what God needs. Okay, so let's go through this. Nefesh Elokis desires a relationship with God, relationship with other souls to fulfill God-given mission. The focus is on what it's needed for. And with this now we have our second definition for tonight. Nefesh Elokis, the human soul that yearns for a closer relationship with God and to fulfill its divine mission. Now, yes, go ahead. Let's follow the yellow brick road. We're going there. We're going. Excellent question. Excellent question. Excellent question. But before we answer that question, which we will, which one's a stronger? Which is a stronger one? Is it an equal? Are they equal in their strength? So Hasidism, Kabbalistic literature explains that the Nefesh HaBahamis, the animal soul, is actually significantly more robust, more powerful. And that's why it's called an animal soul. It's called an animal soul because just like an animal has greater physical strength, right? I don't know about you, but my nose can't carry so much, but an elephant's nose can pick up 600 pounds. Right? Or its trunk, that is. A chimpanzee is 4 times stronger than a human. Now, we have superior mental capacity, right, that surpasses any animals, right? But when it comes to raw strength, you can't beat them, right? This is true of the animal soul as well, right? Let's take a look at text number 2 on page 113. This is from the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak. The ox's strength produces abundant crops, as it says in Proverbs, King Solomon. That is to say that the animal soul's drive is more potent than the godly soul's drive. Now that's why when it's 10 degrees or 10 degrees below zero in Montreal and it's snowing or it might be icy outside, right? Very few brave individuals will show up to my class. But across town, if there was a football game or a hockey game going on, there'll be tens of thousands of people at that place. Why? Because here you attend with your godly soul. Over there, you're motivated by your robust animal soul. And that's going to get you there much faster. Right?
We're not here for the honeymoon.
No, sweetie. Elliot, you had a question.
But it would seem to me that one is not stronger or weaker, but they're in a constant battle.
We're not finished, but it is more robust. Again, look how many people are around the table here tonight. It should be, the Olympic Stadium should be filled with people coming to study the world of Kabbalah. And there should be going to watch the Montreal Canadiens, even in the days of Guy Lafleur, should be this room. But it's not. It's not.
Robust.
Strong.
Right.
Dominant.
But you've yet to talk about, or maybe it's not part of the
well, we haven't finished yet. We haven't finished anything, but we're,
of intent. It would seem to me,
go ahead.
The godly soul has a much more profound intent.
Well, we're not finished. That was not the question. We're asking what's stronger. Stronger. We're not asking what's better. That was pretty obvious what's better, right?
No, but intent is
and that's why there's 30 people in the class here and online. There's 30 odd people that are in the class here, and at the Montreal Canadiens there's 30,000 people, right? Because intent isn't what drives us so much. Anyway, can we leave it at there? We're going to continue. Well, you'll see as it develops. Bobby.
By the way, the people on video are also watching the game.
I was wondering why they're on their video isn't showing.
One of the questions of the music said, well, for here, you're sort of, that's nefesh elokim.
Right.
And I'm saying, if I accept the definition of nefesh v'hamid, which can include compassion and kindness, because we do it to get something out of it.
Right. You're right. It could be. You're right.
I'm here because I want to get something out of it.
Right. Okay. Point well taken. And it could be, you're right. That's the example I gave of act of kindness, right? The act of kindness is because it's self-serving. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel, rich. It makes me feel, as a decent person.
Coming here tonight is the same thing.
Yeah, 100%. You're right. It could 100.
It should be something else.
Right. Yeah. You're right. Okay. Yes. Point well taken.
But you can't confuse self-advancement with acknowledgement and gratification. They're two different.
Well, self-advancement is gratifying, hopefully, right? It is gratifying, isn't it?
Self-advancement is an end in itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's develop the idea. I think when we develop this further, things will fall more into place. I think, we're only giving definitions right now. So I would suggest your questions are valid and appropriate, but I think as we develop things will become clearer. So unless it's something that you don't understand, that you need clarification on the concept, let's move on. And okay. By the way, how's the temperature in the room? Do we need? Do you want the air on? On the left side, the left button on the bottom. On. It says on now. Yeah. Okay. Good. So we'll get some circulation of air. Right. I just realized. Huh?
Fan only.
Fan only. Yeah. Okay. You're a fan only, right? All right. All right, folks. Beautiful. So what we have over here are two souls that are always mentioned before. Ellie, maybe you mentioned, are in constant competition for our hearts and our minds, right? So this is why when we did the exercise before, we found contradictions, because we were talking from two sides of our soul. Because sometimes I'm like this because I have my godly soul talking to me and motivating me. And sometimes I'm like that I have my animal soul motivating and, talking to me and motivating me, right? Because this is the battle that we have between us. And the truth is, the more we have a conflict in this area, the more we really are truly alive, as we will see. Okay? So, accordingly, whatever we've learned about the human soul, we spoke about the 3 garments in lesson 1. Lesson 2 was about the 10 attributes. Lesson 3 was about desire, will. This applies not once to us. How many times does it apply? Twice, because of 2 souls. In other words, we have a complete makeup of being in 2 souls. Furthermore, when we spoke earlier in lesson about the soul being pure, tahirehi, that it inherent desire for goodness, for God, we're talking about the godly soul, of course. On the other hand, when we spoke about the soul's desire to live, or the natural affection that a parent has for a child, or right, for a child, this is all referring to the animal soul. Those are all natural, instinctual. Just like the animal lives by instinct, so that's the instinct of this animal soul / human soul, natural soul, as we call it, right? Each soul, complete set of garments, attributes, and overarching desire. Okay? Now, so the question arises. Now. In the past 3 lessons, what have we done in each class? We've done something very unique. We've taken the human soul and show how it reflects in what? Where is it reflected in? Seder Hishtalshalus, in the order of creation, right? That's what we've been doing every class. We've shown creation, right? The order of creation, and showed how that reflected in the human soul. Correct? Well, then why then do we have 2 souls? In fact, how is it possible to have a soul that's incompatible with sanctity and godliness? Where's the animal soul? Where does it fit in with all of this? Right? Where does it come from? Why 2 souls? How could the animal soul be an opponent to godliness when godliness is what creates the world? Where does it come from? And finally, based on what we just explained earlier, the animal soul is stronger. How does it become stronger than the godly soul? Forget about that we understand the concept on the ground. Now it has to reflect the way it is in heaven above in the order of creation. What's that called? The order of creation? Huh? Seder Hishtalshalus. Can we all say that together? Seder Hishtalshalus. All right. At least that word we've been using every class, so please. So we need to understand all of that. All right. We're good? You're not good? You're great. Okay, to solve this dilemma, we're going to take a detour right now to have a sharpened understanding of the spheros. Lesson 2, we spoke about 10 divine attributes, which form the world of Atzilus, right? The world of emanation, the emanator, right? There's God, godliness, emanator, and creation, biyah, right? So if you look at the Kabbalah map, we see that each sphera is divided into two colors. Did you notice that? Two colors there, and your map that you have with you, right? It's divided into two colors. Why? Zohar explains in text number 3 on page 114. The king is present within the 10 attributes of Atzilus. He and his vessels are one in that world. He and his lights are one in that world. So, what does this mean? In the world of Biyah, right, which are worlds that sense their own identity, we explained, separate from God, as opposed to the world of Atzilus that is entirely godly. Therefore, the king, which is, what is our king here in reference to? Or Ein Sof, the limitless light of God, is unified with the 10 attributes, right? But notice, what do you notice? Over here is that the spheres consist of two things. And they're both united with the king, with the Ein Sof, with the Or Ein Sof. What is that? Lights and vessels. Now, what is a light and what is a vessel? It's language of Kabbalah. So light is an abstract energy that behind any given reality, while the vessel is the structure with what shapes it and executes it.
Do we have this in our book? Those two definitions?
Where we'll have it in we'll have it in a moment. Let me give you a few examples of what that means. There's abstract energy and structure and application. So let's turn to page 115, figure 4.1, lights and vessels examples. You have a book. What's the light is the idea. What's the vessel? The words. A melody. The light is the emotions. The vessel is the musical notes. Business, light is vision. Vessel is the strategy. Relationship, light is love. And the vessel is action. In religion, the light is the beliefs, and the vessel is the rituals. In other words, a book that has words but no idea is not a book. It's just nonsensical words that have been written. On the other hand, if you have ideas, but you don't put it into words, then you don't got a book, and you can't share it with anybody, your idea. It'll be stuck in your head, and that's it. A relationship without feelings and passion is not a relationship. But on the other hand, if you have a love, right? What's love? Is that light or vessel? That's light. But if you don't put it into a vessel with an interaction between your loved one, then you don't have a relationship. You just have a feeling but you don't have a relationship. Is that clear? So when we're speaking about divine spheres, we're also speaking about light and vessels. We're clear? Yeah, we're all on the same page? Good. Now, of course, we have to strip away from the physical understanding and appreciate this Kabbalistic idea, because anything physical, we don't mean physical light and physical vessels, right? But we use that as a metaphor to appreciate. So let's put it in the simplest terms. When God chose to emanate his infinite ability, that's called Or Ein Sof, in the spheres, he projected 10 energies. Each of these divine energies is tasked to make a specific expression of it, a single sphera, right? But if the energy itself is just a raw power, that raw power we call light, oiris in Hebrew. That alone will not create an attribute, that raw energy. We need something else. Just to bring out this idea further, as we explained actually in the third lesson, what's the nature of the light? It wants to be connected to its source, right? Just like a physical light has a source, it doesn't have a desire, but it's connected to its source. So the spiritual light wants to be connected to its source. Well, its source is infinite, right? And because of that connection to its source, that's a raw energy that will have no parameters, no definition, no expression, right? Just like the love that you have for someone, that when you don't express it in an action, or if the idea you have in your head and you don't express it to someone in words, spheres wouldn't come to be, right? Wouldn't yet be spheres. So what do you need? Right? Actually, you need to be able to bring it out into a specific parameter and definition. And therefore you need structure, organization, definition. That's called the vessels. Like physical vessels, right, give a parameter to what it holds, right, gives definition, right? So likewise, the light that is a raw energy and it has no definition, no parameter, until the vessel contains it, then it can become an expression of called chesed, or gvura, or tiferes. Is that clear?
So the vessel itself determines what it's going to be.
The vessel is the determinant of, right, because it's giving parameter, right? It's giving a parameter to what it contains. Or the light, imagine, another example would be, if this was a red, if this was red and you had a light that went through it, it would give it a red, a red glow, it would give it a red color, right? The light would be now, right, where the light has all parameters, all possibilities, right? But once it hits the vessel, right, and now it has a limitation. It becomes red. If it's blue, then it becomes blue. So it's the vessel that gives it its definition, its parameters, right? And that's what we have over here. So we have the infinite that now is expressed by the defining vessel that gives it its definition of this is chesed and this is gvura and so on. Okay, let's look at text 4a, please. The light itself is in a state of simple abstractness. The vessel imposes a definition on the light in the form of a particular attribute of wisdom, kindness, and so forth. So, divine light is a generic ray of godliness, elikus. Without kalim, without vessels, structure, and form, they produce nothing. So, kalim, vessels, introduces the concept of wisdom, kindness, into the equation, right? So obviously you need the raw energy. So for example, if you only had the vessel, the container, the word, for example, if you said, I love you, Yankel, but you didn't have the emotion, the raw energy behind it, then it would just be words that are meaningless. Right? It's a vessel without a light. But if you had the light, the feeling, and you had and you didn't express it to Yankel, and to say it to him, you have no connection. Inside of you, you have the feeling, but that's it. Is that clear? So let's see here. Again, wonderful. Ooh, Hold on 1 second. I need to stop this. So I realize I didn't share properly. Give me a moment. My apologies. I have to press these two. There we go.
Welcome to our fourth video on the world of Kabbalah, our journey through the mystical layers of the Kabbalistic system. Today, we'll analyze the Sefirot, which are actually a combination of two elements. The Kabbalists call them Orot, lights, and Kalim, vessels, spiritual containers or conductors for the divine light. Now, there's no electromagnetism in the spiritual heavens, so the terms lights and vessels are just metaphors. Light refers to the abstract divine energy behind any particular reality, and vessel refers to the structure applied to that energy to facilitate a specific function. Okay, that's a bit heavy, so let's use Benny as an example. Benny got beaten up at school, and Benny's dad is really disturbed, which, by the way, is a powerful but undefined energy. It is the light or force without any particular vessel or outlet. But Dad has several options. He could release it as frustration with the school, anger at the attacker, empathy, love, and guidance for Benny, compassion for a bully who needs emotional redirection, and so on. Those are all potential vessels for the same basic light. So the vessels of the Sefirot are 10 unique outlets for the same basic energy. They apply structure and definition that turn divine energy into chesed, love, gevura, discipline, tiferet, harmony, and so on. What if we kept the divine light but deleted its vessels? It would be like Dad feeling deeply disturbed at Benny's experience but having no ability to express or do anything about it. And what if we kept the vessels but deleted the light? It would be like Dad having the ability to react but lacking any motivation. In either case, there would be no reaction, no result. So this example helped us understand why the Sefirot are equipped with lights and vessels. But we've still got a problem. We refer to the divine abstract energy as light because it is constantly connected with its source, God Himself, just as sunlight is present only when the sun is present. Being intimately connected with God gives it a powerful appreciation for God. It longs to melt into God's infinite self and is utterly averse to being channeled into a limited structure. As for the vessels, they pull the other way. They're so addicted to structure that they have no patience for the abstractness of light. Talk about a personality clash. How can they ever fuse together? Simple. We're discussing the world of Atzilut, which is in tune with God's desire. It knows that the purpose of its existence is to create the finite worlds of Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiya. So out of loyalty for God, the conflicting components of the Sefirot set aside their dispositions and work harmoniously to achieve the greater good of God's goals. That's good news for us for two reasons. One, it allows us to exist. Two, our souls are the great-grandchildren of the Sefirot of Atzilut. So we inherited the ability to set aside our personal dispositions to achieve the greatest good, whether it is to care for another, pursue a mitzvah act, or embrace our ethical responsibility.
All right. So, what do Kalim introduce? Structure, framework to the light, right? And that's how we actually get a sphera in reality, right? But there's a second important feature that Kelim introduce. In lesson 2, we spoke about God emanating the spheres in order to direct the worlds, right? They are responsible for everything in the worlds, ultimately. And therefore, as we explained, that sometimes God gives us chesed, meaning kindness we're not deserved of. He's just giving. Sometimes he gives us because of gvura. In other words, exactly what is coming to us. And sometimes it'll be compassion, whatever the case may be, right? The manifest light themselves, however, are not capable of directing the world. Why? Because they convey the light of the Ein Sof. And the Ein Sof is transcendent of creation. It's beyond creation. It's too powerful, that light, for creation. So what is it that links to creation that enables that we get God's kindness, his gvura, tiferes, and so on? It is the function of the vessel. Text 4b, please, on page 116. The lights of Atzilus, by their very nature, are abstract. They also aspire to return to their source and become wholly subsumed within the sublime origin. Accordingly, they are far removed from creating the worlds of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. Rather, lights must first install themselves into the vessels of Atzilus in order to energize the creation of the worlds. So, what do we have over here? Well, so we have lights. They want to go back to their source. Vessels, they are about channeling downward towards the world. So we have two definitions here. 4.3, orot, lights, abstract divine energies that are closely tied with their source, but are primed to produce divine attributes. They're primed only. They can't do it. Right? Kelim, on the other hand, vessels, divine entities of definition and structure that define the lights and channel their energy into the lower worlds and therefore become functional. All right. So as we said in the video, so succinctly, we have a kind of issue over here now. What's that issue? Oires are abstract rather than defined. They desire not to be their source and not channeled elsewhere. Kelim, on the other hand, don't sense their source. Right? So they're not seeking to be absorbed in their source or desire to be connected. They're interested in what's happening below them, right? So what do we have over here? Something that's not natural. We don't have a natural cooperation between them because they're opposite forces. Is that clear? So let's look at 4c from the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. He explains the Rebbe Rashab, lights and vessels are inherently opposites. The lights by their very nature are abstract. They are also aspire to return to their source and to become wholly subsumed within their sublime origin. By contrast, vessels are a defined nature. Their desires to retain their configuration and are naturally inclined to descend to lower realms. Yet in Atzilus, the Oros and Kelim transcend their natures. And the reason why, 4D, as we learned in the video, just to reiterate this point, because of bittul, self-abnegation, self-effacement. They are entirely submitted to God's intent for creation, namely, that the universe should become an orderly habitat and not left in chaos. Is that clear?
So the union of opposing forces goes way long before man and women.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Now, so we've elaborated on the inner working of the spheres and Atzilus, explaining how light and vessels, Oros and Kelim, merge, right? But what we're going to see now is something interesting. What we just described is not the first edition of Atzilus. Yeah. The Kabbalists tell us there were two editions of Atzilus. The one we've been discussing till now is take two, second edition. Now let's go into the first edition. Are we clear? What was the first edition? You know what happened there? Chaos. Torah opens with the following verse, text number 5, please. In the beginning of God's creation, of heavens and earth, the earth was chaotic and desolate. Darkness was on the surface of the deep, and God's spirit hovered over the water. God said, let there be light, and there was light. So what does it mean that the earth was chaotic and desolate? So a lot, by the way, just these few verses over here, we could spend months, if not a year, if not a lifetime. There's so much here, right? So there's a simple meaning of what these verses mean, but the Kabbalists,
You're back.
You're muted. You turn on your microphone, Rabbi Fine. Can you hear me?
yeah. Oh, what happened to the recording? Okay, what do you see now?
The gallery.
See the gallery, okay. Oh, no, it's not showing the same thing.
It's a full-
Sorry. First of all, are we recording? Yeah, we're recording. Okay. Why is this? Oh, but here it's showing differently. Why?
It's a full screen. Looks good.
No, it's not the same thing here. Yeah, but it's not the same as what's over here and what they're seeing.
But you're gonna do it. Oh, yeah. This is what they're seeing.
Uh-huh. Just here.
Yeah.
Not here. How's that?
You have to
Go ahead.
Alt tab, Rabbi,
Go ahead.
to here. There we go.
Okay. Thank you. Oy. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's go to the third verse now. And then it says, and let there be light. Folks, you're with me?
Yeah.
What is it, let there be light? That refers to the emanation of Atzilus. However, prior to the emanation of the 10 spheres alluded to the second verse in the Torah, but it resulted in chaos, desolation, and darkness. This is an idea that's taught by the Arizal. Let there be light is emanation. Oops. It was desolation prior to the emanation before Tzimtzum. Let's see. Text number 6, please. The earth was chaotic and desolate. This refers to the breaking of the vessels, Shviras HaKelim. God's spirit hovered over the water. This refers to the lights that the vessels failed to absorb. And therefore, there was a shattering of the vessels. So what? What does this mean? There was a breaking of the vessels. What does that mean? And why? What does it even, in a non-material manner, what does it mean? What does it mean, unabsorbed lights? And why? What's going on over here? So before we handle this subject, we need to then understand and make no mistake that Seder Ishtalshelus and everything about it is precise. It's the chain reaction, shall we say, of particular functions of everything. in the creative process. And the terms chaos, desolate, shattering, that sound like a cosmic error and that it's not something desirable, in fact, it is. It's part of the function of Seder Hishalshalis. There's a hierarchy of things, and if there was chaos, it's planned, it's directed, and desired. So let's read an explanation of what happened in the world of Tohu. Text number 7a, please. The lights of Tohu were intense and powerful. They intensely desired to be nullified and subsumed within their emanating source. They had no sense of what their source wanted of them. As a result, they failed to deviate from their default nature for the sake of submitting to their greater purpose. Ooh, listen to this. This is very, you need your thinking cap on now. The 10 lights, they emerge from divine infinity to emanate to a particular definition of a sphera. However, instead of completing the task, this is in the first edition of Atzilus, right? Not talking about the second edition that we all know about. The first edition, right? The light wanted to be subsumed in its source because that's its natural desire. That's its natural inclination. That's what it knows. That's comfortable for it. The fact that they didn't want to connect with the vessel, right, is because they weren't aware that there's a divine plan here. They weren't notified. Again, metaphorically speaking, whatever that means, right? They weren't notified. So they all wants to do is to be in sync with its source. But the ultimate purpose is not for the light to be synced with its source, as we learn in addition to, right? It's to be fused together with the vessel. Is that clear? So as a result, the light is too powerful, which means because when they're intimately connected with their source, that light is too powerful. And therefore, the vessel can't absorb the light. And what does it do? Shatters it. The vessel, for its part, it doesn't want to have anything to do with that immense light. It's too much for it. It doesn't look upwards. How does it look? Downwards, towards its functionality. But it has, so it's looking downwards. It's going in this direction. That's going in that direction. It's too great. It's too powerful. So what do we have? Shattering of the vessels. Destruction, chaos.
But what happens to the light as a consequence? Where is the light? What happens?
1 second, I'm going to finish off. So this is the problem we have, right? The lights refuse to become defined spheroids. The vessels don't want to serve the lights. They don't want to be right? They don't want to hold the light inside of it. It wants. Each one is doing what they want, what they are by their nature. In the first edition. In the second edition, we already explained, is that they actually are very different, but for the sake of the purpose of God's intent that they become aware of, they fuse together. They fuse together.
But they have to become aware.
They have to become aware. They weren't aware in the first edition. Lots of questions. Don't worry. Just follow the yellow brick road. Don't worry about your questions because they'll all be answered. I promise you. They'll all be answered. As crazy as this all sounds.
But it makes me think of hydro when our power is off. And then
hydro is only chaos.
But you know what I mean? They say
Anyway,
Not your electric things, because when we put the power on,
be too
it's
powerful.
gonna break the.
Right.
That's what it made me think of.
Yeah, yeah. Good example. Excellent example. Thank you. Text 7b, please. Page 120. The vessels could not contain the light because they were not sufficiently submissive to pair with the light's intense abstractness. They acted like a wick resistant to the flame, resulting in the flame slipping away. Right? The wick has a function, but it can only have a function if it's willing to submit to be consumed. Remember, the wick has to be consumed in order to create a flame. So it has to really to submit to that. It's losing something in the process, right? So it has to submit to it. That's the vessel. But the vessel wasn't willing to do it. It didn't want to be paired because it's got a different nature. It doesn't want that. Okay? So we got a problem. It's an unhappy marriage.
Which vessels?
Huh?
Which vessels?
The vessels of that to create the 10 attributes, right? You have an unhappy marriage between the divine light and the divine vessel. Each wants out. The light wants to return to its source. The vessel wants to move away, to slip away the flame from the wick. Doesn't want to hold on to it. And this is indicated in the verse, and the Spirit of God was hovering, referring to the lights that slipped away because they returned to their source. It's hovering. It's not enveloped. It's not enclosed. It's merely hovering. So the vessels ceased to be receptacles, as indicated in the first half of the verse. It says, and the earth, which is Kalim, was chaotic and desolate.
Why do they say the Spirit hovered over the waters? The water. Why did they choose water?
That's, yeah. Okay. So this is what the Kabbalists call the breaking of the vessel, Shviras HaKelim. So we got some definitions over here. 1 second. Oh. We have the definition of tohu, chaos, a system in which divine orders, lights, and kalim vessels failed to sense God's ultimate purpose for which they had been emanated, resulting in lights returning to their source and the vessels remaining without lights. Then we have the term Shviras HaKelim, breaking of the vessels, when the vessels no longer lend definition to the lights, but become standalone entities, broken vessels. Okay, so now what happened after this? We're left with broken vessels from the whole thing. After Tohu, God released a second edition, the 10 spheres, but this time, the way we described earlier, that the Oris and the Kalim are willing to put aside their natural nature and to follow the divine purpose. Right? Now, to highlight the contrast in the new order with Tohu, we call this tikkun, correction. It's a correction that's made. Like sometimes you've got a bull market and, there's a correction in the market because it's gone Tohu. It's gone first edition, gone wild. And then there's a correction in the market, right? Now, Tohu didn't actualize the 10 divine attributes because it was not able to endure. But Atzilus then, it corrected it in the world of Tikkun, correction. The second edition, right? Is that clear? So what do we have here? Another definition. The solution is Tikkun. it's aware of God's deep wish, and therefore it's able to bring the two opposites together. So Tikkun, the second emanation of the Sphirot, in which the lights in the vessels sense God's purpose, causing them to set aside their default natures and allow them to remain paired with each other. You have it in your book, page 123. Okay? Sure. Okay. Now, I'm sure you're full of questions, and you should be, right? Why did God do this? Why would he emanate tohu, a world of chaos that would not last, that all we have from there is broken vessels? Now, from a human perspective, you can get this, right? From human perspective, you get it, right? Anybody who's an author knows they wrote a book, the first edition. And after the first edition, well, sometimes the first draft, but sometimes they even actually make the first edition. And afterwards they realize, oh, got to fix this and that, and I got to change this and that, right? And they make a second edition. That makes sense for a human being, but not for God. Why didn't God launch right away into Tikkun? What does he need tohu for? These broken vessels. And of course, as we noted earlier, Seder Ishtalshalis has a function for everything. So tohu obviously has to have a function. It's purposeful. Even though it's out of sync with God's divine plan, yet it has a functioning God's divine plan, as everything does in his creation. So,
Rabbi.
yes. Yes,
So it says the chaos was over the earth. So by that time, the whole universe was already created. It was only the earth that the tohu occurred.
No, everything was created in the first word of Bereshis. Big Bang was in the word Bereshis. Everything was created, but it was in a soup mix.
But
Sun,
it says
the moon, everything was there. It was all there, but undefined, not placed, and not evolved or devolved, if you will. That's that's tohu. Well, anyway, we'll follow through.
Okay.
We'll see more about that. We'll see. We'll get a little more about that.
Okay.
Okay. So what do we have here? As a result, the light, the auras, they return to their source. There's broken vessels, they remain in place. And they become part of the story of Seder Hishtalshalis. God wants this. All along, this is part of the plan, that the vessels should be exposed to an intense degree of divine light, but now they're free of it. They couldn't absorb it. They were exposed to it, but couldn't absorb it. And now they're free to be part of the divine mission. That evolves into 4 worlds to come into being against the backdrop of these Kalim. So just as our lives today are constructed upon many past experiences, the experiences, even if they occurred many years ago, still can yield a very strong influence in the choices that we make today. Similarly, the Kalim of Tohu, they remain as a strong influence in the world of in the Seder Ishtalshalis, as they come into the world of Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. In those worlds, those broken vessels are concealed. They don't sense the divine mission. They lost it, that sense of divine mission. Okay. So in Tohu, they were out of sync. But God desired those vessels that were out of sync in Tohu. Now they're in our world, but in a concealed manner. What that means will be next week. Okay? They lost that connection. But what we can point to right now is that within our world, it's disjointed from godliness. And the most dramatic example of that is within us. What does it mean that we're disjointed? Text number 8 from the Alter Rebbe. So we are comprised of both Tohu and Tikkun. Our godly soul are products of Tikkun and are therefore inherently subservient to God. Our animal souls and bodies are products of the broken vessels of Tohu. Although inanimate objects, plants, and animals are also linked to Tohu, the concept of separation from God is far more prominent in humans. That is because all other things cannot sin, and therefore do not become completely separated from God. Humans, by contrast, on account of our bodies and animal souls, are capable of sin, and consequently becoming far more separated from God. So we wondered earlier, why do we have two souls? So now we have our answer. We have a godly soul that comes from the spheres of Atzilus, but we have an animal soul in a body that comes to us from beyond Atzilus, from the broken vessels of Tohu, which is the first edition, a higher form, a higher world. Where is it now? It descended into Biyah in a concealed manner. So let us see how Tohu and Tikkun are reflecting the particulars of two souls. Let's see. So we have in front of us. What came first? The world of Tohu, then the world of Tikkun, correct? Yes. Right? What came first? Our animal soul and body, and then our godly soul. Right? Our godly soul comes second. It doesn't come in first. What's the proof?
That's why the animal soul is stronger.
That's a different point, right? What's the proof that our animal soul came in first? Because when you cry as a little child, you're crying for yourself. You're not crying for somebody else. You're not crying for the hostages. That only comes with maturity. The full godly soul only comes in by bar and bat mitzvah. And not even then it's complete. It's the beginning of completion. So what are you starting with? Your animal soul. So it becomes stronger because it gets a head start. Right? So it came first. And then, right, as Tohu came before the first edition, Tohu came before Tikkun. And then it's self-centered. Our animal soul is driven by self-centeredness, as we explained. And what was Tohu? It was self-centered. The light wanted to be subsumed in its source, and the vessel wanted to do its thing, be functional, following its nature. Yeah, that's self-centered. We're not blaming. There's no judgment over here, right? We're talking about a fact. As opposed to the godly soul, right? It remains spiritual. It senses the presence of God. It puts away its, as it did in the second edition, the light and the vessels come together in order to create the spheres. And here, the godly soul puts aside its, personal interest in order to do God's desire. The animal soul, will make us ultimately deviate from the will of God, while the godly soul remains loyal, committed to his plan and to please him. The broken vessels, the animal soul derives from the broken vessels. What are broken vessels? Remember at the beginning, we spoke about how you define lights and vessels. Light was like a book that has words, but no light, meaning no ideas behind it. Bunch of babble, right? It's meaningless. That's the animal soul. It is driven as the broken vessel by meaningless life. Like the Greeks said, there's no purpose to life, so eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you shall die. On the other hand, the godly soul senses purpose. And it recognizes it's merely, a vehicle for the purpose that we are created for. Therefore, it's like a beautiful book that has a beautiful idea, rich in content and rich in ideas. And then powerful versus the average strength. So the godly soul, the animal soul, comes from tohu, the broken vessels, right? It didn't absorb that intense light, but it has a connection to that intense light. It's untempered force. Well, that's our animal soul. It's intensely aggressive, energetic, and determined. On the other hand, the godly soul is coming from tikkun, the second edition. Doesn't have the same power, the same intensity. It's tempered. Its desires are curbed in order to fulfill the will of God. So the purpose of Tohu ultimately was to enable this powerful, dynamic energy, right, that a person has within them to be for God. And that's why we have two souls, a godly and an animal soul. That's clear? So, as we said, every step of Ishtalshelus has a purpose and also includes the human makeup. So we already now know the purpose of Tohu and the broken vessels is to provide the human with his two souls. But what's its purpose? Why the two conflicting souls? Obviously, there's something about the conflict that is pleasing to God. So the Arizal explains on page 126, text number 9. All of the mitzvahs are designed exclusively to purify the animal soul and the mortal body. By contrast, the divine soul does not require rectification. It has no intrinsic need to become installed within an animal soul and mortal body. The sole purpose for doing so is for it to illuminate and rectify them, the animal soul and body. Understand this well. The reason for the soul descends to this world is to rectify and purify. So according to this understanding, the purpose of the two souls is to mirror the original origins of it. Tikkun means rectification, correction. It's coming to correct the flaw that was made in the first edition of Tohu to make it workable. What's going to be workable here? The spheros. In the first edition, they couldn't get together, the vessels and the lights, right? Each one had their own agenda. So now we mirror that down here, the godly soul that follows the animal soul in order to come and rectify it. Is that clear? Now, there's something beautiful here that comes out. You follow everything. If you follow this and you get it, you see yourself differently. You see the world differently. But listen, what comes out of this is something amazing. Where's the animal soul coming from? Coming from a very lofty, holy place. A very lofty, holy place. Tohu. Right? Yeah. again, there's no judgment of fact that there was some that they didn't follow the divine plan. That was part of the divine plan, that they should know the divine plan. But it's a lofty level of godliness, right? What does this mean? It means that our animal soul ain't the devil. It's not abject evil. It's not a monster, which is contrary to popular culture. Popular culture will tell you, I've got the angel on one side of me on my shoulder, and I have the devil talking to me on the other side, right? No, that's not Judaism. That's definitely not Kabbalistic literature, Hasidic teachings. That's not the reality. The animal soul is a godly force. It lost touch. It's disconnected because that shard came into this world. And what's this world? It came from a lofty place, but what's this world? This world's a concealed world. So it lost its way because of where it came to, not where it came from. That's very different. So it needs to be rectified. And that's why we were given the godly soul to help us do that. So we can bring it back to its original settings, and even then some. And how's that done? How do we accomplish that? As we said in the text before, primarily through mitzvahs. When the body and the animal will submit to God's desire to fulfill what God wants, whatever it is at that moment, meaning you become a vessel for the purpose that God created you for that moment, whatever that mitzvah is in the moment, and I'm ready to give myself over to that, whatever it is, what's ever needed from me, right? Not what makes me feel good, not what's going to be gratifying, not what's going to help me climb the ladder in the corporate world or in the spiritual world even, because that's about me. It might be good, it might be some good quality, but that's not your godly soul talking, right? That's maybe the better side of your animal soul, right? The better element in the animal soul, but it's not the godly soul talking to you at that time, right? So when we recognize that, then we are we actually live in a different type of living. And therefore, Chassidus emphasizes how important prayer is as a result of this. It's essential because it helps us to sublimate. That's the mitzvah that we do. All right. So let's look at text number 10, page 127. The emphasis on prayer to bring us to this idea. Because what are we talking about? We're talking about we have a lofty divine soul, but we have an animal soul that comes from a lofty place and now needs its direction in order that it can reach to the source of where it came from. So following is from the previous Rebbe's Sikha. Rabbi Gershom Ber Apar deeply understood Hasidic philosophy and was a man of few words. Nevertheless, he had a habit of translating everything into Yiddish. I heard him counting the Omer on the first night, translating each Hebrew word into Yiddish. As he did so, he did the same on each subsequent night of the Omer, translating everything into Yiddish. He once asked Rabbi Peretz, the rabbi of Nevel, the latter of Chernigov, whether it's permissible to translate everything into Yiddish, including portions of prayer during which one is forbidden to make any interruption. Rabbi Peretz asked him, why would you want to do that? He responded, because my animal soul understands Yiddish better. He understood that prayer only in Hebrew, then you're talking to the godly soul. The godly soul knows Hebrew, right? It's God's language. But my animal soul, it knows Yiddish. So I need to translate it into the mamalashon of what it understands, talk its language, right? Because after all, the animal soul comes from tohu, and therefore it has it comes from tohu, but it has all the faculties, right, of intelligence and emotions. It's capable, but you need patience with it. Translate it to a language that it can understand. That's what we need to do, right? In other words, the godly soul will want to do something just for the connection to God, the connection to another, to do good for God's sake. The animal soul wants to have a benefit. So here, what we're saying is, it doesn't mean you shouldn't feel the benefit. You should appreciate. In other words, you come into a way that not only do you do it for the sake of God, but you translate it to your animal soul that it too appreciates it, it gains from it, that there's personal gain. But that comes after you first understand that it's not based on personal gain, it's based on something deeper than that. But then you bring it down and translate it to the animal soul, that the animal soul knows, wow, there's something amazing here. This is the greatest self-help that there can be in one's life, studying, Jewish teachings, Kabbalistic teachings, Hasidic teachings. This is amazing stuff to be incorporated in my life. And with that, we're going to take a moment to meditate on that, to translate what we have just absorbed and to translate and talk to our animal soul, which wants, what's the benefit, what's in it for me, right? Understanding that there's something greater than that, my godly soul is now inspiring my animal soul that it should appreciate the goodness of what I have, of being a Jew, living as a Jew, with Torah, with mitzvahs, that yes, the godly soul wants it just for its pure attachment, but that needs to also translate at the same time to the animal soul in its language that it can appreciate. If you can shut off the lights, we're going to have a Hasidic melody. Hey, we can meditate upon this. That's good. Perfect. Ooh. I picture the Rebbe singing this. There's of the Rebbe singing this himself. It's unbelievable. The Shamil, very famous melody, and called the Shamil. Yeah, one day we'll tell you the whole story about him. The lights. Thank you. So let's bring this to conclusion. So there's another important element that comes out over here. If what we see in the world, there's a dichotomy between the holy and the mundane, right? Because if I have, the angel on one side, on one shoulder, and the devil on the other, so in everything there will be a dichotomy. But we just explained that there isn't a dichotomy. Yes, there is an order in creation, first edition, second edition, all planned and purposeful, in order that you're going to have the power that's on the first edition of Tohu, of the world of chaos, right, as reflected in the biblical verses, as we showed, right, that it should come down here into this world and get lost and concealed over here, in order that what we do is then take that power, right, and that power is that power within us, as we explained, of the animal soul, but it will also express itself in other ways. Text number 11. Do not assume that the only way that we come close to God is while we engage in Torah study, prayer, and the performance of mitzvahs, and that we are turned away from God while we engage in earthly endeavors such as eating, drinking, and the other deeds, needs, right? Because that's the other, angel, the Satan on my, the devil's on my other shoulder. No, but this is not the case. We're instructed to know God in all our ways. We can connect with God through every endeavor. So what does that mean? Again, because it all emanates from the divine, even my animal soul, it needs to eat, it needs to drink, it needs to sleep. That's what my bodily functions, they all need. But if they are directed by tikkun, if tohu is directed by tikkun, right? If the correction where the soul comes from, the godly soul comes, right, is now fixing what failed in the first edition, higher, more godly, but a failing. So when it's directed by it, then it becomes a holy activity. Then our eating and drinking, if we're doing, we eat in order that we gain strength so we could do a mitzvah. If, though, we only eat, right, for the sake of the pleasure thereof, then we don't have the vessel and the light coming together and sinking in together. Then each one is going in its own journey. And then you have, a life that is of a broken vessel, not a whole vessel. You didn't complete yourself as a result. So that means when you go to work, you could go to work in a self-centered way. You go to work because you represent the Jewish people. You represent God. You go there as a representative of the Jewish people and of God. and you go with that notion, especially today, what's going on in the world, that you go there in that proud manner and you deal in your work in an honest manner, and you give, you even in the middle of work, you'll steal some time away at lunchtime. I mean, if you can't steal someone's time if it belongs to them, but if it's lunchtime, you'll steal some time to study, right? So what you're saying is that your work is part of the divine order of things, right? Because now it's your divine soul that is giving the guidance, giving the correction to that area in life that would otherwise be just devoid of it. Furthermore, what we'll begin to look in the physical world, we'll see that everything is a reflection of a divine reality. That's how we will look at life. That's how we will look at life. So in text number 12, the Alter Rebbe says that the animal soul is tremendously powerful due to its lofty source. Consequently, although it has fallen far below, it continues to generate far greater passion than the godly soul can produce on its own. So that intensity that could be misguided, but now when it's guided by the divine soul, right? Then, therefore, what's going to happen as a result of this is all of, is that when it comes to freezing cold weather, you will still be here because the godly soul will direct you to come here rather than to any other place. So wrapping up, there was a chassid, and wrap up with the story. There was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe who was deeply troubled, and all of his efforts that he could make, he could not influence his son to follow the right path. So he turned to the Alter Rebbe for guidance. So he told him, invite your son to come and see me when next time he is close to Liozna. The young man was resistant. He had no desire to see the Rebbe and to remind him of his heritage. But eventually, his father convinced him, and he came to Liozna. How did he come? Well, you know what he was into? He was into horses. And he came horseback. Now, back in the day, that was not a Jewish way to travel. Stagecoach is one thing, but not horseback. But he came horseback as he's coming as I am. The Alter Rebbe inquired of him, how did you get here? He told him, I came by a fast horse. So he said, I came fast horse, that way I could reach my destination quickly. The Alter Rebbe said, but what happens if you take a fast horse and you go off path and you go in the wrong direction? Then you go in the wrong direction much more quickly, don't you? He says, yeah. But then he responds back and he says, but yeah, once you realize that you went off the wrong path in the wrong direction, when you have a fast horse, you'll be able to get back in the right direction quickly. Ah, says the Alter Rebbe, once you realize. And all of a sudden, he woke up and he realized what he had done, and he fainted on the spot. When he woke up, or he got up from his faint, he realized, once you realize that you're off the path, at least if you got a strong horse, you can come back. And he was a strong horse. And he came back and became a great chassid. That's what happened. So in today's lesson, we learned very much the same story. We're all riding a horse. It's called our animal soul. That comes from a very strong, lofty place, Tohu. Edition 1, right? At times, it takes us into a deep straying off the path. It moves quickly. But before we realize, we're lost. How often does it happen that we get upset about something? We get it, and we think about it more and more, and we get angered, and who knows what, and we're off. We're off track. We're lost. However, It's no reason to despair. Because God gave us an animal soul for a reason. It's to tame it, to sublimate it. And all we need is to realize that I have a purpose. And if I realize I have that purpose, then I'll be able to come back from my strayed way. So the animal soul's nature and origin, right, and its purpose, it will give us the strength to come back when we realize that we're off the road, and therefore we will go back on tikkun, to the complete and the proper road, and it will have inner harmony as a result. That is what happened here. Oh, there you go. That is today's class, folks. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts? Say hello, everybody. Doctor, you have a question?
Yeah, Rabbi, the
Louder.
animal soul also has the 10 spheroids,
We
right?
mentioned that. Yes, we mentioned that. Absolutely.
But do they also have a kesser?
No, I don't
No.
think so. Good question. I don't think.
So kesser is okay. I
Yeah.
got it. And
Kessler. We spoke earlier that the animal soul is is the same like the godly soul. We have two, and they both have a complete makeup of intelligence and emotions, right? Chabad and all of these 7 emotions. They're both there, right? They have a different function, or they express themselves differently. One is, self-directed. One is God-directed, but they are both have a full, personality. Absolutely. Good question. Any other questions?
And one more question: when a person dies, the animal soul stays behind, and the godly soul rises up.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, the body stays behind, the animal soul, an aspect of it. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Very okay. Any other questions?
So an aspect of it stays beyond.
Yeah. All right. I hope everybody followed. I hope it wasn't too difficult.
Thanks for the class.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you.
very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Thank
night.
you, Rabbi. Good night.
Good
Bye.
night. Thank you all.
Have a good evening.